You good to go, Sayyid?
𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗕𝗏, dear viewers. It's a Sunday night and it's a regular opportunity for Bayat Ghadeer to have another presentation on a continuation of our Deobandi series. I'm your host, 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗏, and I'm joined by 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗔𝗖𝗧 and 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗔𝗧. So we'll have a short show today, inshallah. The topic area will be, obviously, as I said, a continuation of our Deobandi series and our dealing with the issue of disrespect of the companions. But before we do so, as everybody knows the format of our programs now, we always tend to address a kind of examples of dishonesty and rebuttals. We tend to focus either on the dynamic duo one week, and we deal with the new kid on the block, Brother Haji. What can we say? What can we say about Brother Haji, which has not already been said? Suffice it to say that in this day and age, he seems to be desperate to become like a 𝗬𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗧 of the Deobandi movement. And he's so desperate to be kind of, when you get that someone new in school and he really wants to get known by everybody, don't you think so? That he'll start jumping around and hoping someone notices him. He's desperate for that. So desperate that he ends up going to Hyde Park and having debates with really old folks, guys in their 60s whose English isn't particularly good, where, that sort of age group where they get very emotional and riled up, and he debates them and then puts them online like he's had some massive debate with some I don't know, someone of some 𝗦𝗨𝗥𝗏𝗧𝗏 level. So, I mean, that's all part of his MO that he adopts. But obviously his norm is comedy hour. And by comedy hour, I mean his style of just bringing a Shia narration, presenting it. There's a cameraman laughing his head off while he presents it, reads it, and then just leaves it at that. What's so funny? Oh, guess what? There's a narration and it's got this thing, which is ridiculous, or this thing. It sounds ridiculous. So let's have a good laugh at everybody's expense by quoting it. The problem that we have here, brothers and sisters, is when we have this sort of approach where he tries to impose his position on what is or what isn't stupid or irrelevant or ridiculous or risible, because he doesn't like it, he doesn't believe in it, he wants everybody else to accept it because it's not in line with his thinking. I'll give you an example. To the outside observer, the concept of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, riding a white horse, Burak, into the heavens on one, going up into the heavens, would be beyond comprehension. If a non-Muslim was to get hold of that, he would laugh and laugh and laugh. And if he was to make a channel just to mock that, what would your response be? You understand me? Or other notions, even the concept, even the Quranic concept of Prophet Moses dividing the sea. That would cause ridicule. Last week, we quoted the narration about an esteemed Sufi saint from the book of 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗏𝗏, who had a magical skill of having a large penis, which he could pull out and beat his disrespecting students with. These are all miracles. These are all, if it's done by a non-prophet, it's called karamat. So we've got examples of miracles, which to a non-Muslim, to an outside observer, they would be risible and comical. And we've got an example of a karamat with a man with a magic penis. That would be viewed as quite amusing, wouldn't it? But in the world that Haji frequents, everything is A-OK as long as it's in a Sunni book, because it's a Sunni book. The problem for Haji is, if it's in a Shia book, then it can be made fun of because it's in a Shia book. And the funny thing is, recently, and of course, inshallah ta'ala, we will be addressing lots of his nonsense that he does produce. He quoted a Shia narration just the other day. And in the midst of it, it was another example of one of the karamat of one of the Imams, alayhi salatu wasalam. Imam Ali, actually. And he actually then has a disclaimer saying we don't reject the concept of karamat. We don't. We just need to cut through this BS. Prima facie, he doesn't have any issue with the concept of karamat. But if that karamat exists in the Shia work, which is beyond his comprehension, he'll reject it because it just doesn't, because it sounds like BS to him. And yet, he has no problem. But like I said, but if an outside observer was to look at the miracle of Buraq and the Prophet going into heaven, that would be a Prophet splitting the, having an elongated penis that he uses to beat people. That could be viewed as BS. But as long as it's a Sunni book, it's fine. But once it's in a Shia book, obviously not those narrations, comprehension, it has to be risible, it has to be comical, and it has to be refuted, because basically it's BS because it's in a Shia book. That's not really a standard of argument. Or because I don't like it, because it's in a Shia book, it must be funny. That's not how you deal with stuff. That's not how you deal with. On the one hand, he tries to argue that he's a very academic chap, a student, into academia, into honesty, integrity, and yet he himself quotes narrations which are weak. That's one thing we know. Or he will quote a narration and just laugh and mock it because it's beyond his comprehension. And I think the real thing is, it's not a problem if his scholars have magical long penises, or if the companions. Ibn Taymiyyah talks about the ability of scholars, of saints, of karamat, because it was not beyond comprehension to believe if they could walk on water or fly. But could you imagine if those narrations of walking on water or flying exist in a Shia book? Hajj, you'd be first to pull those narrations out and mock them. But Ibn Taymiyyah, he says that very same concept, that's fine. But you see the inconsistency here. Say that, am I making sense?
Yeah, you are absolutely. No, you're right, 100%. I think people. Well, firstly, 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦, and secondly, I don't think people should impose their worldview on things. That's for sure. As you said, there's many things which people could potentially find ridiculous. But yeah, we will deal with that further into our other episodes, I think. I don't think we want to spend too much time on Brother Haji. I know he's a big admirer, for sure, a major fan. But inshallah, what we'll do is we'll deal with one of his videos, which he brought up, I think it was a couple of weeks back. I'll play the clips so the viewers can have a look themselves. Is that okay, Sayyid Hassan? Is there anything you want to mention before that? Or?
No, I think that's fair. I think that's what we need to do. Let's quote the narration, and then go from there. Go for it.
No worries. I'll bring it up on my screen.
We put the camera. Now, this important topic is about the watermelon. The watermelon. And there's issues that we need to address. I've got a qualm to pick with a watermelon today. And I'm not going to let my feelings get the better of me. So let's present the narration. Narrations, not narration. I'm going to present now 3 books addressing Shia problems with the watermelon. Okay, let's get started. This is 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢. Okay, hold on. Someone did a video about me regarding my flaws in Arabic. So listen. 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢. Okay, the saw, not the saw, alright? So record a video about that, yeah? You don't want to show your own face, do you? You don't want to show your own face, you don't want to recite, do you? Cheeky. So let's just sauce. So this is page 249. Okay. Now it's quite big. Let me show you. Here it is. It's quite lengthy. So I'm going to basically summarize it because I've got 2 more books to quote. Okay. So let's get into it. So basically, there's a narration here that a man entered upon Ali radiyallahu anhu, and Ali radiyallahu anhu ordered him to buy some watermelons. So he said, فَوَجَعْتُ بِدِرْهَمْ, and he found some dirhams. So he went and bought so he bought 3 watermelons. Okay, so he bought 3 watermelons. So he got, I caught one, فَإِذَا هُوَ مُرٌ, and it was bitter. So فَقَالَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِرْمِ بِهِ مِنَ النَّارِ إِلَى النَّارِ, throw it to the fire. So the watermelon was bitter, and Ali radiallahu anhu, or radiallahu anhu, said, throw it in the fire. So it goes, Irmi bihi min al-nar wa ila al-nar. So throw it to the fire. A watermelon is bitter, and your narration says, Ali radiallahu anhu said, throw it to the fire. Strange. So then he said, وَقَطَعْتُ الثَّانِي, and he cut a second watermelon, فَإِذَا هُوَ حَامِضٌ, and it was sour. So he responded by saying to Ali radiallahu anhu, حَامِضٌ يَا أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, it's sour. So Amir al-Mu'minin said the same thing, throw it to the fire. And then he said, I cut the third slice. فَقَطَعْتُ ثَالِث, he cut the third slice. And then he goes, it was venomous and infested. So Amir al-Mu'minin said the same thing, throw it to the fire. ثُمَّ وَجَعْتُ بِدِرْهَمْ آخر. He found a few more dirhams in his pocket, and he bought 3 more watermelons. But these watermelons were not a good batch, so he bought another 3. And what happened was, I'm getting to the end now. So these watermelons were hulu, they were good. What happened? The main part, let me brace myself now. So basically, Amir al-Mu'minin said, he turned to 𝗙𝗦𝗕𝗦𝗦, and he said to him, 𝗙𝗦𝗕𝗦𝗦, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى أَرْضَ وَلَايَتَنَا عَلَى أَحْلَى السَّمَوَاتِ وَأَحْلَى الْأَرْضِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presented our wilayah to the people of the heavens and the people of the earth. And who else? مِنَ الْجِنِّ, and the jinn, from the jinn, وَالْإِنسِ, and the humankind. وَالْثَمَرِ, and the fruits as well. So the wilayah, or the wilayah, was presented to the heavens and the earth, no problem. Jinns and mankind, no problem. وَالْثَمَرِ, and the fruits. وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ, and other than that, so the wilayah was presented to everything. Well, let's carry on. Now listen to this, brothers. Because فَمَا قُبِلَ مِنْهُ وَلَايَتَنَا, whoever accepted our wilayah from the heavens, people of the heavens, people of the earth, the jinn and the mankind and fruits. Whoever accepted it, our wilayah, whoever accepted our wilayah, it is sweet, tahur and water. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَقْبَلْ مِنْهُ, whoever from the fruits etc. did not accept it, خَبُثَ, it is filthy and rotten. So the fruits etc. who did not accept it was rotten, filthy. Okay? So watermelons have a big problem because they did not accept the wilayah. Watermelons did not accept the wilayah. And this is an 𝗧𝗧𝗏. Let's get to another narration. Let's join the evidences together. So this is page 363.
Okay.
So he's narrating a hadith. Okay? Literally, covenant, whatever. And guess what? Let's present the books. A challenge. There's 2 watermelons here. Okay, there's 2 watermelons here. The narration had 3.
Okay, so that was, I think, pretty much the main part of that video. Sayyid Hassan?
Yeah, absolutely. That is basically it. That's part of his comedy gold. The fact that Wilayah is something which has been asked of all creations. Okay, and then obviously he quotes this narration which talks about the fruit, and from that a melon. You can see that, and he's obviously brought melon with him, and he'll eat it, and there all the ha 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 ho ho ho, all the fun comes from the back of it. Now the question is, what do we talk about? I mean, at the end of the day, the concept is a covenant. Okay, a covenant essentially is like a contract between 2 people. And when, from an Islamic perspective, when we talk about covenant, it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm talking about something that which is agreed between Sunnis and Shias. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken a covenant from all of us. In fact, from the Al-Sunnah texts, it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken a covenant from in the state of ruh, in the spirit state, from the believers. So it isn't something that's unusual. He gets the believer to testify in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's something, so that's why all believers, all individuals, when they're born, they're on a state of fitrah, the belief in oneness. So essentially that's what that covenant encompasses. Now, for us, we've got no issue with that. That's something I would say that both sects wouldn't really have an issue with. But now let's take it further. Is there an objection if we believe that that covenant extends not just to individuals in the state of ruh, the state of spirit, Does it encompass and cover other categories? That's what our discussion is. Now, for dear old Haji Sahab, he got indigestion over the fact that fruits are also form part of the covenant. And what we will inshallah do is we shall blow the wind out of Haji Saab's sails by presenting something from his works. Over to you, Sayyid Ali. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Said. Give me a moment. What I'll do is I'm going to bring it up for everyone to see. And as usual, we'll present everything from their books. We'll present the scans for the viewers, and then we'll apply the same type of standards, same type of strategies as what Brother Haji does. So what you'll see in front of me is a document. Said Zedi, do you want to jump on, inshallah?
Yes, Sayyid. So the first reference that we will be presenting will be from 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦𝗢𝗔𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢𝗔 وَمُنْتَخَبُ النَّفَائِسِ. This is from author, is a Shafi'i author, Safuri al-Shafi'i, is a 9th century scholar. And the book that we have is from volume number 2, page number 427. So he says, حكاية عن أنس رضي الله عنه قال خرجت مع بلال وعلي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنهما إلى السوق فاشترى بطيخا وانطلقنا إلى منزله فكسر واحدة فوجدها مرة فأمر بلالا برد البطيخ إلى صاحبه ثم قال ألا أحدثكم حديثا حدثنيه رسول الله صلى الله حدثني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قال يا أبا الحسن إن الله تعالى أخذ حبك على بشر وشجر فما أجاب على حبك عذب وطاب ومن لم يجب إلى حبك خبث ومر وأظن إن هذا البطيخ ممن لا يحبني. Go ahead, Sayyid.
Sure. So can you hear me, Sayyid Zedi?
Yes, Sayyid, go ahead.
So Al-Safuri mentions in his book a story from Anas ibn Malik saying, I went out with Bilal, Hazrat Bilal radiallahu, and Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam to the market. So he brought a watermelon and we went to his house. So he cut one of them and it was bitter. So he ordered Bilal to take the watermelon back to its owner. And he alayhi salam then said, shall I narrate to you a narration that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said? He said, O Abu Hassan, verily Allah has taken an oath from mankind, and trees to love you. So whoever and whatever embraced your love, he or it became good and wholesome. And whoever rejected your love, he or it became filthy and bitter. He alayhi salam then said, and I think this watermelon was of those who did not love me. So let's have another tradition. Sayyid Hassan, did you want to comment on that tradition? Sayyid Hassan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In all honesty, it's very similar to the narration that we've been talking about.
Well,
so,
mentioned.
But exactly. So, dear brother Haji, who's having great laugh at our expense, needs to perhaps
his own books.
Look at his own books.
Said, I think he also says that he'll be bringing 3 books. So
yeah, we do the same tactic. We'll just put 3 books.
3 books, that's it.
Yeah, that should be sufficient. Even though it's repeated many times, I think those 3 should suffice.
Yeah.
Sayyid, do you want to read this brief one in Arabic, please? Sayyid Zedi?
Okay, so this is from, one second. This is 𝗙𝗢𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗙𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗙𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗙𝗢𝗙 printed by Darul Kutub al-Ilmiya, Beirut, Lebanon. One second, brother. volume number 3, page number 244, and the tradition number, the report number is 4720. It's from Abu Huraira. كلوا الباذنجان فإنها شجرة رأيتها في جنة المأوى شهدت لله بالحق ولي.
Sorry, can you give me a minute, please? Because I think some of our viewers, they didn't see the previous text. So what I'm going to do is if you just bear with me a minute. Yeah, that should be better now. I think everyone can see that document. So what I'll do is I'm going to quickly go back and just show the viewers the references which we just presented, and they can obviously go back and pause it and just verify it for themselves. Yeah, please continue, Sayyid.
Yeah, so let me read it again. Abu Huraira, and he quotes a tradition from Rasulullah. كلوا الباذنجان فإنها شجرة رأيتها في جنة المأوى شهدت لله بالحق ولي بالنبوة ولعلي بالولاية فمن أكلها على أنها إذا كانت داء ومن أكلها على علفها دواء كانت دواء. لا كانت دواء. Sorry, that should be دواء. Go ahead.
Okay, so the text reads as follows. Abu Huraira, from the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family, said, eat aubergine, because it's a tree that I saw in the high heavens, which bore witness to my prophethood and to Ali alayhi salam's Wilayah. So whoever eats it, I think it might be a typo here. I think whoever eats it excessively, then it will, yeah. Say it?
Yes, say it, go ahead.
You did it dispersingly, right? Just to
so what again?
Is it dispersingly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So whoever eats it dispersingly, then it will be a disease, and whoever eats it as a medicine, it will be as a medicine, as a form of cure. So here, according to this tradition, eating aubergine is considered amongst the great virtues because it bore witness to the prophethood of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, and of the Wilayah of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So we've demonstrated in the previous narration the watermelon, the aubergine. Let's go to another tradition. This is from Sahih Bukhari. Sahih Bukhari, volume 5, page number 249, hadith number 4083. Also in Sahih Muslim, volume 3, page 356, hadith number 337. There's a scans for the viewers. You can always go back, pause the screen, and check it in your own time. There's a front cover, and there's the same tradition again. Let's have a look at what the tradition says. The tradition says, chapter. The chapter heading is called Uhud is a mountain that loves us and is loved by us. Narrated Anas, the Prophet said, this is a mountain that loves us and is loved by us. Now you are talking about aubergines, you're talking about watermelons, right? You've got mountains here. Now can you explain to us how a mountain, to be honest with you, I don't have an issue with this particular tradition, but since you find these traditions to be ridiculous, can you explain to us how a mountain loves the Prophet? Because love is naturally emotion. Do mountains, do stones have emotions?
Exactly. Very good point. Very good point. Because obviously emotion is a characteristic, isn't it? A specific one. So you have to possess it.
I think with all honesty, I was going through a research, and there was an author, a Sunni author, that had a whole discussion about animals and plants having senses, and they being able to answer, and they being liable to Allah in the day of Qiyamah, or not in the day of Qiyamah, or they being mukallif, like the way human beings are. Likewise, animals and plants are also mukallif. So he was quoting so many traditions from their books. So it was a whole proper discussion he did. So firstly, we need to see what exactly his ishqal is. Is the ishqal because he had problem with watermelon?
I know.
Or does he has ishqal with the mountain of Uhud too. Like we need to be really precise with the اشكال. Once we know the اشكال, then we will be able to answer likewise. We just can't have someone quoting a narration and someone having a background music of a laugh. That's not a background music, but someone laughing at the back.
Yeah.
Because this doesn't tell us the main اشكال. Just saying, oh, we don't believe in this BS or we don't believe in this thing wouldn't help us in specifying what exactly the problem is. Do you get my point?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, let's go to the next tradition. And I think, yeah, this is from 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗢𝗔𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢. And again, it's the same sort of tradition, which Brother Haji found it hilarious, and his friend who laughed like Muttley in the background, he should also likewise be consistent in his approach and laugh at the traditions mentioned in his book. From Anas, may Allah be pleased with him, saying, Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam gave Bilal, Hazrat Bilal, may Allah's peace be upon him, 1 dirham to buy a watermelon. He said, so I bought a watermelon, so he cut it and found it to be bitter. So he alayhi salam said, take this back to the owner. And he returned the dirham because the Messenger of Allah told me, verily Allah took an oath of your love from the mankind, the trees, the fruits, the seeds. So whatever embraced your love, it became good and wholesome, and whatever did not embrace became filthy and bitter. And I think this watermelon was of those which did not embrace it. To be honest with you, it's quite a beautiful tradition. I mean, I'm reading this from a Sunni book. Personally, I have no issue with this tradition, because here it's talking about the covenant that God made with the whole entire creation. Okay, as Sayyid Zedi mentioned at the start, okay, nobody denies that a covenant was made with a prophet or with general human beings. Okay, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to his creation, am I not your Lord? The commentators, numerous scholars have discussed this in detail. So the level is at what level, what was actually presented as what gave covenant to what gave covenant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Was it the ants that you use to make ant oil with? Was it the dog's tail you used doing sexual antics? Like, what was it? So these are things which obviously you need to take into consideration, because it's not the fact that it's mentioned in our books, it's mentioned in your books. Okay, you need to shouldn't be so one-sided in your approach. But since you have an obsession with watermelons, I want to give you a gift to reflect on. So
remember, we like giving gifts.
Yeah,
no one can say that we're greedy.
Yeah,
we are. One thing is, people always say that Sayyids are individuals which are all about giving. So here's a special gift to Brother Haji.
Here's a special gift for you to contemplate on. So this is from the famous scholar Ibn Qayyim, and Ibn Qayyim says, in reference, this is a whole big discussion they're having about masturbation. Okay, let's have a look at what Ibn Qayyim says.
Let me read the Arabic.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please do.
وإن قور بطيخا أو عجينا أو أديما أو نقشا في الصنم فأولج فيه فعلى ما قدمنا من التفصيل قلت وهو أسهل من استمنائه بيده. Go ahead, see.
Okay, sorry, give me a second. Yeah, so Ibn Qayyim mentions if a man makes a hole in a watermelon, or a piece of dough, or a leather skin, or a statue, and has sex with it, then this is the same as what we have said about other types of masturbation, i.e. that it's halal in the same circumstances given before, such as being on a journey or extreme situations. In fact, it's easier than masturbating with one hand. So here Ibn Qayyim is actually encouraging his supporters and his followers that, instead of masturbating, your easier option is to use a watermelon. So, really, are you guys in any position to take the moral high ground here? Okay, fair enough. You have these watermelons. We don't take it to the level of actually penetrating them. You penetrate watermelons according to your fiqh. It's allowed. It's actually more easier than masturbating.
I think that probably would have made him angry. I think saying watermelon didn't accept the Wilayah. That's why
they allow sex with dead people. They allow sex with animals. Even they allow penetrating babies. They allow looking at a woman's vagina with lust. They allow to even ejaculate during fast and Hajj, they rub ant oil on their penis, they put dog's tails on their backside. They believe that if you drink water from Tanvi's feet, you seek salvation. They believe you can write the blood with, the Quran with blood and urine. They believe you can eat at Hindu gatherings like Holi and Diwali. Are they really in any position to talk about watermelons?
No,
Yeah, they love taking the moral high ground. I never understood that.
No, I think one needs to understand the reasoning behind
I'll tell you what to
going.
do. I'll give you some advice. Go now. Go get 7 ants. Yeah. Mix them with jasmine oil. Bury them in between 2 graves. Rub them on your private parts. And penetrate a watermelon. If you are a true supporter of Ibn Qayyim-Jawzi and for what he believes in and what he stands for, and the fatwas
And 𝗙𝗢𝗧𝗏 and
the fatwas of his scholars, and you can attach a dog's tail on top of it as well. You could do a practical demonstration so we can see the type of rulings that your scholars have given.
And by the way, I think so. A lot of times, someone is posting pictures that he's in East Jerusalem and wherever, right? So he is in a journey right now. So I think it's the best time to use.
So can I play something for you guys? I hope you heard that. That was actually a laugh from a famous animation called 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗓. I don't know if people know who 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗬𝗓 is.
Oh yeah, I'm old enough to remember that.
It's still not better than the one we have at Hajj's video.
Oh yeah. But anyway, brother, please take our advice. These arguments you're bringing forward, these are old recycled arguments. If anything, whatever you try to bring forward and try to present against us, it works at 10 times, worse for you. So, try to actually deal with our arguments. So far, we're having to not only respond to people like yourself, but even the 2 individuals who, to be honest with you, have gone completely quiet at the moment. Maybe they're behind the scenes trying to refute these series, which inshallah we look forward to. Yeah, really, my friend, just trust me. You've got more to lose on this issue than us. I can assure you on that.
Thank you very much, Sayyids, on that one. And Brother Haji, if you have got some of that melon left,
share it.
There's a hole ready for you. But obviously, if you do got pop round Haji's for dinner, you might want to stay away from eating melons. Now, that aside, Haji Saab, all we have to say is, those living in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Remember that. And unfortunately, time and time again, you keep throwing stones. And to be honest, it's not really working out too good for you. Now, we are essentially returning to our topic area. We haven't spent too long on the rebuttal today. Today's topic is pretty short. It's a continuation of last week's, essentially. Deobandi is essentially becoming Kafirs on account of their own standards when it comes to the issue of disrespecting the companions. They have a kind of a formula that essentially, almost like a red line, that if you were to commit any of these specific offences with regards to any sort of dialogue about the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, should you do so, you fall into the category of apostasy. We evidence how ridiculous that concept was in our last show last week, where a number of their scholars essentially fell within this takfir fatwa and in consequence couldn't really be regarded as Muslims. And we shall continue that topic today. Sayyid Ali?
Yeah, sure. I'll bring up the document. You mentioned the criteria they gave for what they considered to be blasphemy against the companion of the Prophet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present it again for the viewers to have a look at what some of those conditions were. There were basically 4 conditions that Maulana Muhammad Abu Bakr Ghazipuri mentioned in his book, 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗦𝗙. And he says those 4 areas are: number 1, saying of a Sahabi is not binding. So the statement of a companion is not evidence, number 1. Number 2, the action of a Sahabi is not binding. So they consider that to be is a form of disrespect. Number 3, the opinion of a companion is not binding, so where he gives his own verdict on the issue. And number 4, the understanding of a companion is not binding. So now, according to those 4 principles, which they consider to be a form of disrespect or blasphemy against the Sahabah, not only did we present examples in our previous show where we demonstrated where the scholars themselves would have failed to, to fall out of this type of blasphemy, what they said about the companions. But today we can do something again very similar. So bear these 4 points in mind, and then what we'll do is we will mention them throughout our show. So the first one we'll come to is Sayyid Zaidi. Do you want to read the first one from Siratul Mustaqim?
Yes, Sayyid. 1 second. So yeah, this it's from Siratul Mustaqim. It's a book by 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦. It's published by Islamic Academy in Lahore. Page number 68. दूसरा इफादा, अगरचे सहाबी होने के लिहाज से बाकी उम्मत मुस्तफ़िया अला 1 second I can't read it properly की बनिस्बत सहाबा कुबार से हर एक के लिए फजीलत साबित है. The problem, Said, before I read, the problem is that the edition that I'm using right now, or that we are using right now,
no problem.
it's pretty old. But let me read it as best as I can. It's an old edition, old Urdu being used. But let me read it. लेकिन हिदायत के फैलाने और दीन सुनने के रिवाज देने और इंदल्लाह कुर्ब के मर्तबों पर कामयाब होने में उम्मत के बाज़ बुजुर्गवारों बाज़ सहाबा पर बेशक अफजलियत साबित है. Go ahead, Sayyid.
Okay, so this tradition, again, the scholar doesn't need any introduction. 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦, we covered him in the previous episodes. You can just do a simple search to see how he's revered, especially within the Deobandi circles. He says, although by virtue being a companion, every senior companion has proven status greater than the rest of the Ummah. So he goes, there's no doubt that when it comes to the companions of the Prophet, they have a special status compared to the rest of the Ummah. Fine, no problem. Then he says, but as for propagation of Islam, spreading of guidance, and attaining nearness to Allah Azza wa Jal, concerning some of the senior members of the Ummah, are certainly greater than some of the Sahabah. So as you can see, according to these 4 or 5 conditions, propagation of Islam, spreading of guidance, and attaining nearness to Allah, then members of the Ummah can excel the Sahaba on virtue. The senior members of Sahaba. Sayyid Hassan, did you want to say anything on this?
I think it's quite clear, actually. I think looking at the text, it's quite clear what you've quoted. I think we don't need to really. Anyone reads that can see what the consequences are from it.
Well, then you could say you bet. Well, what can you say about this? Okay, anyway, that's clear blasphemy according to the standards. 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗢 mentions, he says something quite interesting, and here he gives a discussion about the companion Anas ibn Malik. By the way, Anas ibn Malik is one of the main narrators within, especially Bukhari as well. He's narrated, I think, after Abdullah ibn Umar, he may be the 3rd most narrated individual in Bukhari after Aisha and Abdullah ibn Umar. Anas ibn Malik is the one quoting a hadith, and he narrated the hadith when he was old, like the hadith that talks about drinking the urine of a camel is also solely narrated by him, and that too is quoted by him by Qatada. Then Ghazali writes, Abu Hanifa had this belief that no doubt companions, may Allah be pleased with them, are just, but they are not absolved from making mistakes in quoting narrations because of them being ummi, naive, and their old age. Therefore, at time of conflicting narrations, the one among them who's a faqih, who's the most knowledgeable in traditions, should be given preference over others. Therefore, in order to negate the possibility of a mistake, others should be given preference over old people's narrations. So as you can see, what they've done here is they've basically put the Sahaba in different categories when it comes to accepting report, right? Is that making sense to you guys?
Yes, Sayyid, yeah.
You remember we discussed this at the start, the 4 conditions of what they consider to be blasphemy. I think one of the conditions is saying a Sahabi's opinion is not binding. I think another one was saying that the action of a Sahabi is not binding, and the understanding of a Sahabi is not binding. So they consider that to be blasphemy. But as you can see here, that pretty much throws everyone under the bus.
Absolutely. There's no one left.
There's no one left.
Everyone's under the bus.
You can practically apply this to all the companions then.
Oh, absolutely. They're all gone.
We could say, well, when this Sahaba, when Abu Bakr said that the Prophet does not leave any inheritance, he was senile. He was old. He didn't know what he was talking about.
That's right, Sayyid. One more thing that I want to mention here is this book, the one that goes with the Urdu name, is different than the one in Arabic name. So Arabic name is 𝗬𝗙𝗕𝗦𝗙𝗕𝗙. It's a refutation that 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗙 has written to Khatib's chapter of Abu Hanifa, where he mentions different reports about Abu Hanifa being weak, Abu Hanifa being a liar, Abu Hanifa being out of fold of Islam, different quotations that he have from different scholars. So in order to answer that, 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗙 wrote a whole refutation to Khatib's passages, and he termed it 𝗬𝗙𝗕𝗦𝗙𝗕𝗙. And then there was another Salafi scholar that replied to 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗙. His name was Abdurrahman al-Mu'allami. He wrote the book 𝗓𝗏𝗡𝗙. 𝗓𝗏𝗡𝗙 is the name of the book in reply to 𝗬𝗙𝗕𝗏𝗡𝗙. So in 𝗬𝗙𝗕𝗏𝗡𝗙, there are so many passages that are really unorthodox, I would say, to the mainstream Sunni Islam. And this is one of it. Obviously, the Sunnis, and the reason we are quoting in Deobandism is that Deobandis have translated this book. This Hafiz Abdul Quddus Khan Qaran is a big scholar, and he has a book against Shia too, in the chapter of wudu. So he refuted Shias on the topic of wudu, and he has other refutations to different other people. So he is well respected among Deobandis, right? So if Deobandis are translating it, and they are, you see, let me read from the title. It says, let me read it for you guys. So it's Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. محقق دوران محدث الزمان سافي حنفية حضرت مولانا علامة محمد زاهد بن حسن الكوثري رحمه الله की मशहूर किताब तानीबुल खतीब का उर्दू तर्जुमा सिराजुल उम्मत फ़क़ीह मिल्लत इमाम आज़म अबू हनीफा रहमतुल्लाह अलैहि का आदिलाना दिफा. See, so he has said محقق دوران, the researcher of the time, muhaddith al-zaman, the muhaddith of the time. Saf Hanfiyat. Saf means the sword. The sword of Hanfiyat. This one that goes for the fight to defend Hanfi madhab. Hazrat Maulana Allama Muhammad Zahid bin Hassan al-Kawthari rahmatullah alayhi. So it's something that they want to translate specifically, and whatever is in this book, Abdul Quddus Khan or Deobandis, they bear the responsibility too. Because if they would have a difference of opinion with Zahid Qawsi, at least they would have mentioned that in the footnote. Look, this is what he has said, but this goes against the orthodox Sunni Islam. But no, he just quoted and translated the passage without saying anything.
Yeah. This is a big statement by Abu Hanifa, because especially when we know that Deobandis, they consider Abu Hanifa to be Imam al-Azam, right? And even though the fact he did believe that the companions were just, he didn't believe that when it comes to their narrating traditions, that they're not well, they can always be considered to be reliable. Actually, we agree with him here. Just because somebody is a companion of the Prophet, the peace and blessings be upon him, it doesn't mean that they are exempt from making mistakes in what they say. So I don't know why you guys try to propagate this belief that you consider all the Sahaba to be just and truthful, when in reality your books say otherwise. And it's no wonder why, when I think there was a recently leaked conversation between one of the Deobandi sheikhs and I think 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦, where he mentioned, oh, you messed up by agreeing to debate the Adala of the Sahaba with the Shia, because he knew himself that even his own books would never be able to defend this position. Well, as you can see, we've demonstrated that quite clearly in this reference here, this one reference alone. So let's go to the next passage, and this is from Maulana Taqi Usmani, and he says, as for the narration of Abu Mahdura, may Allah be pleased with him, is concerned, then the author of Hadaya being, this is the famous Hanafi book, Al-Hadaya. This book is so important. I think even if you read the introduction of this book, there's mention of it that they believe that this book actually abrogates all previous books. Okay, whether that includes the Quran or not, that's a whole different debate. But they consider this book to be really important. It's a very important work. And he says, the author of Hadaya has answered the Prophet, may peace be upon him, repeated the two testimonies of faith, the Shahadatain, for him in order to educate him. And then he says, however, Abu Mahdura, may Allah be pleased with him, thought that it's part of the Azan. But this commentary of the author of Hadaya is a demonstration of his ill thought about the understanding of Abu Mahdura, Allah be pleased with him, which is not appropriate. So I don't know if you brothers want to elaborate on that, because I'm not sure if the viewers understand what's actually going on here.
All right, so let me talk about it. So as we have discussed that in the past episode, that the faham of Sahabi, the faham or the understanding of a Sahabi, if someone considered is as not a hujjah, according to Deobandi standards, he is gustakh, or he is someone that abused that Sahabi. So here मुफ्ती तकी साहब से है, जहाँ तक अबू महदूरा की रिवायत का ताल्लुक है, उसका जवाब साहिब हिदायत ने ये दिया है, وكان ما رواه تعليما فظنه ترجيعا, यानी हुजूर अकरम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने तालीम की गर्ज से शहादतैन को बार बार दोहराया. So what he said was that Prophet repeated the shahadatain, or the two shahada, in order to educate Abu Mahdura. But Abu Mahdura thought that this is part of the adhan. Wow. Even though it wasn't the part of the adhan. So when it wasn't the part of adhan, it was just for the educational purposes. He taught as part of adhan. So when he quoted it in this way. So this is the way Sahib Hidayah, or the author of the Hidayah, is giving an answer. Now Mufti Taqi Usmani says, लेकिन Sahib Hidayah ki ye tawji means his reply, Hazrat Abu Mahdura ki faham se badgumani par mabni hai jo munasib nahi. Right. So he says that whatever is understanding of Sahib Hidayah, whatever he thought as an answer for Abu Mahdura, cast doubt about the understanding of Abu Mahdura, which goes against the Deobandi principle. Right. So either you say that Sahib Hidayah is gustakh, or he abuses the companion, or either you say that Abu Mahdura was not really firm in his understanding. These are the only two options you have. And either option you take is a lost situation for Deobandis.
You kind of screwed both ways in this one, literally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's try not to waste too much time on this particular narration. And this is from. Do you want to read this one, short one, Urdu? I think it's.
Yes, Sayyid. Before I read, one thing that I want to mention is that according to Ahl Sunnah, now there is no specification, be it Salafi, Deobandi, or anyone. For them, as-Sahabah kulluhum udul. Every companion is just. For them, even if they don't know about who the companion was, what was the city he was living in, whether he's been authenticated by a scholar or not, just because he's a companion, so he is authentic. His hadiths are to be relied upon. This is their understanding of what is udul. Right. It is furthermore, but I'm just giving you one part of it. So now, there is a tradition which is quoted by Ubadah bin Samit, if I'm not wrong. Ubadah is a companion. Ubadah bin Samit is a really famous companion. And when the Deobandi author quoted the hadith of Ubadah, he wanted to say that the hadith is weak. Now, he could have said that this narrator in the chain is weak or that narrator in the chain is weak, but what he said is that the hadith which goes as مقحول عن نافع عن عبادة और ये عبادة مجهول الحال है, and he quotes ميزان الاعتدال of ذهبي. And I'm not really sure if it's there in ذهبي's Mizan or not. That's another topic, but
They probably removed it.
yeah, I'm not really sure. Even if it's there, Sayyid, it doesn't matter. But thing is that he is quoting it, and he is trying to use this argument that the companion is majhul, is unknown. That's why the hadith is weak. Now, if you say this, that the hadith is weak because companion is majhul,
Yeah.
then you are basically going against your ijma,
Yeah.
which means that as-sahaba kulluhum udul, this principle is broken.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them are majhul. If they are majhul and because of it the hadiths are weak, so the principle, the kulliya, or the kulliya or the sivar of kulli, it breaks down.
Absolutely.
It breaks down completely, right?
Yeah.
Now this reference is from Muhammad Amin. It's from 𝗦𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦𝗢𝗙. Now 𝗦𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦𝗢𝗙 is called Munadara Islam, Tarjuman Ahl Sunnah Wakil Ahnaf, which means that he is the debater from the Sunni sect, right? And he is the one who defends Madhab al-Hanfiyya. He's such a big figure. And he's also called Hujjatul Islam fil Ard, the proof of Allah on this earth. Right. So this is his book called 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦 وجزء رفع اليدين, and it is translated, and page number is 131, and it's published by Maktab-e Imdadiya, Multan, Pakistan. So let's go to the next one, Sayyid.
I was just going to elaborate on a point here, and when you come across some of these traditions when it says an unknown man approached the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, right? And then they have some sort of discussion, or the man asks a question. Essentially, if you go according to that principle, then all those traditions where it talks about unknown man, they would have to be rejected as well. They would be considered to be unknown, and therefore the whole argument about all the companions being just and truthful, it's a failure.
Yes, Said, one point that I want to mention is I think I really understand, and I completely agree with his point, that if someone is unknown in the chain, we won't accept it unless until special circumstances, right? Now, if a companion is unknown, then we won't accept his tradition, right? This leaves another door to be open, which says that we need to see each and every companion separately. Just because he's companion doesn't give him the certificate that he's a thiqah.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to delve into this matter further, and we need to see if he is being authenticated, how was his lifestyle, if he's someone that we can be relied upon or not. Like, let's say we can see who was Amr ibn As, who was Busr ibn Arta, who was Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan, who was Mughira ibn Shu'bah, who was like what, right? So we need to go specifically person to person, and we need to have this yaqeen. If not the yaqeen, ghalib al-dhan, we need to have understanding that this specific sahabi was thiqah or not, right? But for us to delve into this matter, we are being termed as gustakh, or someone that abuses companions. But if Sunni does it, then it doesn't matter. It just shows you the double standard.
Okay, so let's go to the next scholar, Allama Munir Ahmed Manawar, in his book Namaz-e-Eid Masala, page number 68, and he quotes, he mentions two companions, Hazrat Abdullah ibn Zubair and Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas, and he says they were both children at the time of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. Therefore, it is possible when the Prophet announced that any one of you that wants to read Salat al-Jummah, then he can read, and anyone that wants to go back can go back. That was intended for the people of the village only. But these two companions didn't understand completely what the Prophet means, and they thought it was for everyone. Then it continues and it says, based on their understanding for their childhood, Hazrat Abdullah ibn Zubair acted on it, and Abdullah ibn Abbas seconded him on it. This passage is really problematic. It's problematic for many reasons. Here's a passage there. And what can you say about this text? I mean, you'd have to throw out a lot of the traditions narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas when he was young. I mean, what do you define young? Because you also consider one of the wives of the Prophet to be married at a certain age, narrating a lot of her hadith when she was a child. You have no issues accepting those reports, but then you raise doubts about the, you put to, the whole testimony issue about a woman's testimony regarding half a testimony, etc., etc. But here you got two notable companions, which your own scholars have said that when it comes to them narrating things when they were very young, and their actions or understanding of it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. Is this not Gustaki of Sahabah? Shaykh Hassan?
Yeah, I think that's clear. Yeah.
But one thing that I want to emphasize here is that Abdullah ibn Abbas has quoted so many traditions in Sunni books.
Yeah, I know.
Right? If you would say that his understanding, and we can apply the same principle to Anas ibn Malik, we can apply the same standard to other companions too. We would see same standard would apply if Aisha, the wife of Prophet, would quote something.
Yeah.
Because we would see whether this was done, let's say, if she quotes something for the Hijrah.
Yeah.
Right. So at the time of Hijrah, she would be somewhere around like 9-ish or 10-ish or 11-ish, something like this, right?
Mm.
So if she would be like this, she would still be, she would still not be a grown-up lady.
Oh.
If she won't be a grown-up lady, then whatever she quotes wouldn't be authentic.
Yeah.
Because for us, we'll say, okay, if we'll apply this principle, then we still have this ihtimal, or we still have this doubt that she would have narrated it and her understanding wasn't firm.
Yeah.
And likewise, there are so many companions.
Yeah.
Likewise, for Abdullah ibn Zubair was born in the first or second year of Hijrah, somewhere around this time. I'm not really sure, but he was born in Hijrah, after Hijrah.
Yeah.
If he was born after Hijrah, what was his age when Prophet passed away? Probably 10-ish, 10 or 11-ish, right? Not more than this. If he was this age, whatever understanding he has would automatically be refuted.
Yeah.
Because he was a really small child. And likewise for all the other hadith that is quoted by different other companions, just because they were small, it will leave a big door to be open, and there will be a lot of doubts in a lot of hadiths that different companions have quoted.
Well, to be fair, if we look at even the definition of companion, then even a baby would be included within that group, right? Essentially. Because
yes.
Everybody who saw the Prophet. So technically, if a baby saw the Prophet and he died upon Iman, he would be technically be called a Sahabah. So would his testimony be accepted at a young age? I think there is a companion where they mention him that the dispute is that, whether he witnessed or not, but he must have been very young. So I think the traditions actually mentioned in Muslim about this particular companion. But here now, how again the issue is they won't be all considered to be adult men. They won't be all considered to be well, I wouldn't say necessarily truthful here. The issue is more in terms of the memory, because how would you be able to remember something so far back when you were 4 or 5 years of age? I mean, most of us probably remember our first day in school, but that was a long time ago, right? But we can't narrate the whole event from start to end, what happened the whole day. So if you've got a Sahaba who's, potentially a child, there's issues here. And we're in agreement. I mean, I personally myself, look, I'm not saying that this is necessarily wrong, but by accepting this, what you're doing is you're bringing many doubts into the whole reliability of the companions. Not the aspect about them necessarily lying, but definitely the memory. Sayyid Hassan?
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I think you're right. I mean, once really that opens up a can of worms, because if you're going to use this standard, you've essentially shot yourself in the foot. And unfortunately, that since the Deobandis have this habit of issuing takfir when it comes to the subject of disrespecting the companions, using the very standards that you formulated, which of course you formulated to essentially vilify and excommunicate the Shia Muslim community, you've ended up doing takfir on your own scholars. How amusing is that? How amusing is that? But unfortunately, this is what happens. You see, these people really do not consult their own works, and then we have sort of comedy gold from people like Haji and the dynamic duo.
Okay, here's another
Anything
one.
for,
So
yeah.
Let me go to the next one. So this is from Mullah Jawan Hanafi. If a companion,
Mullah G1.
Jiwan, not Jawan.
G1.
I don't know.
G1.
I don't know whether he was Jawan or whether he was G1, but
He was a Jawan G1.
if a companion who isn't a mujtahid quotes a narration that goes completely against qiyas, then his narration should be abandoned, let alone a saying of a companion that is worthier of abandoning. So let me repeat that. If a companion who isn't a jurist, so that's for one thing, they don't consider all the companions to be jurists. So they only believe a certain group of them have that certain level of scholarship to deduce ruling, right, to give fatwas. If a companion who isn't a mujtahid quotes a narration, so this would most definitely be a narration of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, that goes completely against conjuncture, then his narration should be abandoned, let alone a saying of a companion that is worthier of abandoning. So that's from Nur al-Anwar, volume 2, page 327. Sayyid Zedi, I know, sorry, I keep bringing you forward. I don't know if you want to touch further on that point, because it is quite crucial.
Yes, Syed. Give me 1 second. Let me go through the page again. Yeah. So the thing is that, Syed, as they say that, we do accept the weak hadith too, right? Even if it goes against the qiyas, but it just shows how much they love the qiyas. Right, first thing, وتقليد الصحابي واجب يترك به القياس أي قياس التابعين ومن بعدهم لأن قياس الصحابي لا يترك بقول صحابي آخر. Then it says كما في التلويف فإن رواية الصحابي غير المجتهد قد تترك إذا خالف القياس من كل وجه فقوله أولى بالترك. Right, so anyways, like, firstly, I have two problems with it. One, as a Muslim, I have a problem that if a hadith goes against the qiyas, they are giving preference to the qiyas or the hadith. So when we say them Ahlul Rai or Ahlul Qiyas, or they give preference to qiyas or the hadith, then it's not wrong. It's completely right. Right, and it just it's a dilemma for Sunnis, honestly, or for the Hanfis specifically, that for them sometimes qiyas is so important that they would give preference to it over the hadith. And wallah, when I would go and when I would see the debate between Abu Hanifa and Imam al-Sadiq, and some of them, even Sunni scholars, have quoted it too, I would just think, like, how is it possible for someone to act like the way Abu Hanifa would do? He would give his qiyas priority over the hadith or the athar. And when I came across these things, then I was like, yeah, I understand why. Imam was dealing with the people, or Ma'soom was dealing with the people at the time that would definitely, they would know that this would be a hadith or this is quoted from an authentic passage, but still they would give preference to their own so-called qiyas or the hadith. That's one problem. Second is that they have this specification of Sahabi being faqih. Now, how many Sahaba or how many companions were faqih? Tell me. There were really few companions that were faqih. If you go through this, probably they would say Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and few other companions like Ubay ibn Ka'b, probably, and some other one, right? But I'm not really sure about Ubay bin Ka'b, but someone, like really few companions that they would term as faqih. And they have in their own books that Abu Huraira was not a faqih.
I know.
Right? Abu Huraira wasn't a faqih. Anas wasn't a faqih. So if these companions weren't fuqaha, weren't among the jurists, right? Would their narration be inauthentic because it goes against the qiyas? And I remember, I do have some quotes from books, but obviously we had to be precise, that they have said the hadith of this Sahabi is not to be relied upon because this Sahabi is in faqih.
Actually, Sayyid, you know what? You reminded me of a quotation from one of the famous Hanafi jurists who said something along the lines that if a verse or hadith goes against the saying of the imam, meaning the jurist, then we will give preference of the statement of the jurist over the hadith and the verse of the Holy Quran. So
that's right.
They will go to the extent of even saying, you will say the hadith is weak and the verse has been abrogated.
That's right, Sayyid. It's from it's an Usul al-Fiqh book. I don't recall exactly. Al-Mabsut, I don't recall exactly, but inshallah we can get that quote.
Actually, I remember now. I think it's in 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗓𝗘.
Oh yeah, Usul al-Qarqi, right. So
I think we'll do a whole show on Hanafi fiqh. That's going to be quite an interesting one, definitely.
Yeah, that will be a different thing. But the point here is that for them, the call of their imam is the asl, and the hadith or the understanding or the Quran is secondary thing. So for them, whatever their imam has said, it's something that they have to rely upon, and then they would already have the confirmation bias. So now when they will go into Quran and Hadith, they will be only selecting the passages that will be quote unquote supporting their position only. They won't go into Quran and Hadith trying to derive a ruling by looking different kind of narrations, like different ayah on one topic, and then coming out with a conclusion. No, they already have a conclusion in the mind, and then they are going into the text so they can get something or evidence that they can use for their own imam. You get it? So
it's literally, it reminds you of the verse of the Holy Quran when it says they took the rabbis and the monks as their lords, and in the way they blindly followed them. So it's practically the same thing here. They've actually raised the level of their leaders to like demigods. Yeah, they talk about, oh, you raise your imam to the level of demigods. No, the real people who've actually worshipped this Zeus-like god who sits on a chair and descends down. Sorry, those are the Salafis. The point being is that the way these guys blindly follow their leaders, it's shocking. You'd never see them say, oh, well, the scholar, he erred here. They'll pull out the flaws and mistakes of Sahabah, there's no doubt. But where do we find the statements of, well, if 𝗙𝗢𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗙, when he was older, when he narrated stuff, we shouldn't accept it? Or, do you get my point, Sayyid Zadi? What do you reckon?
Yeah, excellent point.
Yeah, remember, Abu Bakr quoted the hadith of no inheritance before he died, 2 years before he died.
Yeah. So we accept his testimony because he was an old man, and we should take preference over what Sayyidah Fatima ﷺ said because she was younger.
That's right. Completely.
But anyway, let's come to the next narration, next passage. Sorry, it's from Hakim al-Ummat, Abdul Majid Deobandi, and he narrates a story. He said, I saw a really strange dream day before yesterday. I saw that Ashraf Ali Thanvi is in the Masjid al-Quba in Medina, and Thanvi's young wife is also present there. She was really happy after seeing Thanvi. Thanvi said, do you want to see a picture of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him? She said with great interest, of course. In the meantime, someone said that she, meaning this woman, is Aisha, Siddiqa. Now Thanvi is looking very closely at her face and clothes, and the way of life is like his younger wife. So how can she be Aisha Siddiqa? In the meantime, someone said, oh, she's the daughter-in-law of the Prophet. Now the confusion got intense, as the Prophet didn't have any son, so how can he have a daughter-in-law? Then a voice came in that every person who recites the kalama is among the Prophet's children, and a person like Maulana Ashraf Ali is very special children. That is why his wife is called the Prophet's daughter-in-law. And Tanvi replies to the stream by saying, someone Hazrat Aisha is, because her having a few qualities like her. Guys, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Say it. I think the reason it's a really blasphemous statement you make is that as if like I saw my mom and in my dream as my wife. Like, how pathetic would it be? And even if someone has seen a dream like this, is it important to quote it?
Exactly.
Nobody would want to mention it. They'd be ashamed to.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure if someone has seen this dream, then it is not right to even to publish it. If I say now, na'udhu billah, and I really don't want to say it, but let's say if hypothetically if someone says, let's not put on myself, if someone says that I saw my wife, I saw Aisha in my dream, and I took her as my wife. Do you get it where I'm going, right? Wouldn't it be a disrespect to Aisha?
Of course.
No, but because Tanvi has said it, or because Tanvi was related to it, so yeah, it's okay to make some interpretation and just give some answer. Oh, because she reflects Aisha in her age, or she reflects some of her qualities. That's why it's okay to apply Aisha's name on her. Does that make sense too?
Absolutely. And also say this interesting, isn't it? The Quran says that Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, he isn't the father of your men. But in this narration, it seems like the whole of humankind has become children of the Prophet.
But even if you say, let's give them the benefit of doubt. These are the spiritual children, right? The ummah, right?
Okay.
These are the spiritual children of Prophet, right? Okay, we understand. We take this understanding, right? But how does it mean that our problem is not saying with this statement specifically? Our problem is someone saying Aisha as her wife, as his wife. That just doesn't make sense. Even if someone has seen it, then probably they wouldn't firstly quote it. Even if they quote it, they won't publish it. And even if they have published it, they would just say, okay, that was something really blasphemous, and we do toba from it, right?
I think the problem also here is the sort of blind elevation of the scholars again, right? Where they've gone to this extreme. I mean, whether or not he had the story, whether it was true or not, there was no need to really mention it. Very strange, very strange. I mean, obviously,
Sayyid, the problem I have is that if a Shia would have said this, what would be their reaction? I just want to turn down the table and I would say, okay, let's say a Shia saying this.
They'd be burning neighborhoods. That's what they'd be doing.
Yeah, but if a Tanvi does it or someone else does it, oh, these are our Kabir, these are our Buzurg, it's okay, just like few answer here and there, and that's it, no problem.
Tanvi could have rebuked him. He could have said, "Listen, my friend, you've had a messed up dream.
Yeah.
Like, stop dreaming about my wife and stop dreaming about me." No, he didn't even really he didn't rebuke him for it, did he? He just said, "Well, some qualities are found."
And wallah, I would say if someone see Aisha in her dream and write it down to me, oh, I saw Aisha in my dream and I saw someone calling out, this is Sayyid's wife, I'll rebuke him really, really harshly, and I would say, how dare you say this?
Yeah. How did he know? How did he identify his wife anyway?
Yeah, that's another thing. But I'm just like, I'll be like really straight up on it. I'll be like, don't ever mention it to other. You did a big mess. You shouldn't have even mentioned to me. Since you have mentioned it, that's really, really bad. You should do tawbah I should do Tawbah for whatever sins I have, but this is not happening.
As they say in Urdu, Bagarat. Okay,
All right.
sorry, page 499, page 500 of 𝗓𝗓𝗕𝗦𝗢𝗎𝗓, and there is a scan for the viewers to go back and look at. We'll come to the next, and the final one actually. 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦, in his famous book, 𝗙𝗢𝗪𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗢𝗔𝗧𝗑, page.
Say that's 𝗙𝗢𝗪𝗧𝗧 الراشدية.
Yeah.
It's a combination of different other books that he has. Page number 108. Yeah.
And he says the author was asked by a person who disrespects the two companions, namely Abu Sufyan and 𝗙𝗢𝗓𝗪 ibn Abi Jahl, and terms both of them as wretched, cursed upon, and destined to hell, and non-Muslims, then what is the ruling upon them? Okay, so it's a question about cursing namely Abu Sufyan and 𝗙𝗢𝗪 ibn Abi Jahl, and 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗜𝗕 says that anyone that disrespects the companion is a fasiq only. He's a transgressor. In other words, the cursing of a companion is not one which is an act of disbelief, just mere fisk. And obviously, I think he's basing it on the tradition from Bukhari, which says, killing a Muslim is disbelief, and cursing him is an act of fisk. Right? So I don't know if you brother want to finish off with anything on this. But...
No, so this fatwa is important because, see, every time we are being said kafir, because we supposedly we abuse few companions that they respect, right? So we would quote them, then go his fatwa back.
We don't even know who those companions are. As far as we're concerned, they're unknown anyway, right?
Yeah, that's right. But what my understanding is that if you would come on the video and would portray, is this like a muttafaq alayh, or is agreed upon opinion among the Deobandis that anyone that disrespects a companion is a kafir, then surely this is really wrong statement.
Absolutely.
Wrong statement completely. Because for them, he just says fasiq, no kafir, no takfir.
I think that's it, guys. I think Sayyid Hassan, I'm going to pass on to you so we can conclude.
Okay, thank you very much. So essentially, we know that the main argument, particularly of the Takfiri influenced Deobandi movements of this day and age, certainly which in Pakistan were particularly in vogue from 1979 following the Iranian Revolution, that pushed hard to declare the Shia position on disrespecting the Sahabah being evidence that they should be deemed apostates accordingly. That obviously was propagated hard during the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and obviously we've got the spiritual successors of the scholars from that camp, which have arrived in Ghadeer, the north of England, and we have the dynamic duo who have these similar types of positions. So essentially, when they're pushing hard to say that the Shia are apostates because of their disrespect of the Sahaba, and if that is the argument that is being touted by individuals such as the dynamic duo, and which are in turn based on the writings of certain scholars from amongst 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦, Lashkar Jangvi, etc., then they need to look a lot closer to home, because that takfir element, that takfir fatwa that they are hurling on the Shia Muslim community for their disrespect of the Sahaba, it first of all falls plainly in their own back garden, the missile, because what happens? Their own scholars have been saying very, very types of statements, which essentially, if we were to use that standard on the Shia, they're apostates. Well, if we use the same for Deobandi ulama, they're apostates too. So once again, we've come back to the same scenario that those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Look in your own books, look in your own texts before pointing the fingers at others. I think that concludes things for this evening. Does either of the Sayyids wish to say anything else?
No. Yes, 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦𝗖𝗥.
Okay, thank you both. I think that concludes things for this evening. Remember us in your du'as. Remember, everybody, subscribe to the channel, share the content of the channel, click on the notifications. Keep us in your du'as as we shall keep you with ours. Assalamu alaikum.